My name is Doug Kaufman. For the past 40 years, I've dedicated my life and even my career to finding the root cause of disease. Join me in a team of physicians, pharmacists, and scientists, and soon you too will know the cause. The last time you saw me on television, I promised you Dr. Margaret Christensen would be back with us today. We continued our interview. Today she's talking a little bit about hormones and a lot about mold, okay? Speaking of mold, urinary tract infections. Everybody gets an antibiotic, but are they bacterial in nature or might they be fungal? We'll discuss that. And then toward the end of today's show, you know, Doug, I hear you talk often that maybe there's a link, a common thread between fungus and cancer. Well, if that's so, wouldn't antifungal drugs that have all been approved by governments, wouldn't they help cancer patients? So glad you asked. Okay, let's get started right now with urinary tract infections. And you know, folks, I never worked in that area of medicine. I worked in operating rooms, emergency rooms, I worked in ear, nose, and throat, I worked in psychology, I worked in dermatology and so forth. But this is an area, as you work in those fields, people tell you all the time, the patients come in, I have a urinary tract infection, I have to go to the urologist today. And it seems like everyone in their lifetime will have a urinary tract infection, cystitis, etc. So I began digging many years ago to see if there was a fungal component to that too, because there's no shortage of doctors in the world who see you have a urinary tract infection, boom, into their pocket they reach, you're getting an antibiotic. But the word's infection. Can't viri infect? Can't protozoa infect? Can't bacteria infect? But most importantly, can't fungus infect? Can fungus contribute to a urinary tract infection? So let's go over a few graphics that I put here today, hoping to point you into the right direction. Urinary tract infections are called, of course, UTIs. Like most all infections, antibiotics are almost robotically prescribed. But my question is, fungi, can they cause UTIs? Why isn't this ever explored? I mean, that's a fascinating question, isn't it? And I want to make a general statement because I'm here to try and be helpful to you. If you have a urinary tract infection and you go to the doctor and he puts you on an antibiotic and within a few days it hasn't improved, this should be his job, but I'm going to make it yours. Go back and ask the doctor, could this be a fungal infection? It's not responding to an antibacterial. Could it be fungus? And I'm going to give you some information today that will empower you and hopefully empower the doctor that, yeah, it can be fungus, okay? Many people, now this is Candida albicans, which is a yeast in the urine, right? Many people have candiduria, or urinary presence of yeast, Candida albicans, right? Says one medical journal, and this is from the Journal of Mycology, candiduria is considered one of the most controversial issues in patient management. Neither the diagnosis nor the optimal treatment options are standardized. That should scare you. This is further complicated by the lack of defined laboratory criteria for diagnosis, as most of the studies were set for bacterial rather than fungal urinary tract infections. So here's a big medical journal a few months ago saying, we have a problem. All the laboratory tests, the treatments are linked to bacteria. When all you own is a hammer, then the whole world looks like a nail. To a graduating physician in the US anyway, I can't account for other countries. When a physician graduates from medical school in the US, they have a lot of knowledge about antibiotics because there's hundreds of them in pharmacies. They have some information on viruses because there's antivirals, 80 to 100 of them in our pharmacies. They have almost no information on fungus because they learned during their training. These are smart kids, twice my IQ. What they learned is, well, there's a lot of antibiotics and there's some antivirals, but there's what, 10, 12 antifungals? We're not going to cover this in medical training. We're going to dwell on antibiotics. I don't think that's right, folks. Here's a medical journal that says this is further complicated by the lack of defined laboratory criteria for diagnosis. Wow, that scares me. As most of the studies were set for bacterial rather than fungal urinary tract infections. Scary. Folks, as I write in the new book, The Woman's Guide to Yeast and Fungal Diseases, dermatophytes are fungi that grow on skin of a man. Are we passing this back and forth when we have a loving, God-filled relationship with our spouse? Maybe, just maybe, okay? Let's keep going. The paper also says, this same paper out of the Journal of Mycology, guidelines for diagnosis and management of candidiuria have changed considerably over the past decade. In the 1960s, the condition was believed to be benign with no intervention required. You got a urinary tract infection, we're not going to treat it. Of course, this means that the fungus found in the urine of patients with infections was never considered to be the cause, and antibiotics were always used. Again, 1960s. I mean, maybe my mom would have gone to the doctor with urinary tract infections, and they said, well, it's harmless, The one thing I found that was so helpful to so many men and women that I worked with clinically in these doctors' offices was cranberry. Unsweetened cranberry juice. You get it in a jar, I think a pint or something, and I used to tell men and women in 2 days I want this gone, but I want you to use 1/4 of the thick juice and 3/4 water, clean bottled water. And in 2 days, I want that whole bottle gone. And that increased urination and could help get the bacteria or fungus or whatever organism it was moving through their body. Okay, this paper continues. However, over the years, it says new dimensions were added to address the issues associated with candidiuria, which is Candida albicans in the urinary tract, until the latest Infectious Disease Association of America, or IDSA, guidelines were published in 2009, which indicated that there was an increase in the incidence of candidiuria caused by more resistant non-Candida albicans species. So yeast is a single-cell fungus. This isn't all candidiuria. It could be fusarium, it could be aspergillus, it could be penicillium that's in the bladder of these men and women with these problems, okay? What are some of the infective agents? I thought it was all bacteria, Doug. Okay, here are urinary tract infection agents, Klebsiella, etc. These are the bacteria, right? Look at the fungus. Candida albicans, most common, but dermatophytes can transmit via hairless skin, lips, palms, sole, penis, and then there's viral urinary tract infections are rare, says the National Institute of Health in America. Viral urinary tract infections are quite common, says ehow.com. Who do we believe? You just flip a coin. Well, they're rare. Well, they're common. I want you to know that I think it's quite possible that if these are fungal infections, many of them, we're at a change of time in medicine right now. What we've been doing, treating symptoms for 4 to 6 hours at a time, we, the people, are questioning that. We want to know the cause, okay? So let's sum it up this way. The goodness done by antibiotics occurs very quickly, but the damage done by them occurs much later. No doubt many have been spared UTI misery thanks to antibiotics, but one has to wonder how many urinary tract sufferers 20 years ago still suffer from that same infection today. If that's you, please tell your doctor you want to try the antifungal medication called diflucan for a few weeks. While taking this, ask if it's okay to follow my diet, the Kaufman diet, as this also helps eliminate fungal infections. Maybe, folks, after a short period of time, it'll begin clearing up on an antifungal program. Next up, Dr. Margaret Christensen. You're going to love this.
My name is Olivia. I had precancer cells, dysplasia, and then I also had signs of carcinoma on my cervix. And when they found that, they also found a yeast overgrowth. And they told me that I had HPV virus and that I was supposed to be getting surgery to have it either removed or a total hysterectomy. But they were going to do further testing. So they did more testing. There's still nothing that they could do. And they said that we're just going to have to remove it. There's nothing I can change with my diet. And then I saw Doug Kaufman's TV show. And I did the phase 1 diet. And I alkalized my body, cut out sugar, cut out dairy, gluten, soy. And I came back 6 months later, and the cancer cells are gone. Completely gone. I don't have any more yeast problems. I'm not tired. I mean, it's just when you heal your body, you don't just heal one thing, you heal everything. And I mean, I'm going to stick to this diet. I just quit my job. I'm actually going to school for nutrition.
So many times a doctor will put a cancer patient, a female cancer patient, on Taxol or tamoxifen, both from the Pacific yew tree, both tremendous antifungals. So what must cause cancer? It's important that you know this. Okay, welcome aboard. If you guys only knew what went on behind the scenes here, we end up laughing on this.
We're having a good time.
Dr. Margaret Christensen joins me right now. I met her through a symposium. You can still get it online, toxicmoldproject.com. What a great interviewer you were. Thanks. And now the shoe's on the other foot.
Right.
I'm sitting here interviewing you. That was quite a success. I want to talk, here's a doctor who got sick. The best doctors in the world are those who got sick and didn't die, that pulled themselves out. They know it can't be done with a prescription pad. It can be done with a fork and spoon. You had to figure all that out. Can you briefly give me an overview? And then I want to throw the word out, autoimmune disease.
Sure.
So tell me about your story.
Well, basically what I can say is I was, a very type A, high stress individual. I had 4 children of my own. I was delivering other people's babies, and unbeknownst to me, I was living in a moldy house. I had made it beautiful, mansion, and I wasn't sleeping very much because I was an OB-GYN. And so that combination just took me out. Chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia. My brain couldn't think. I could not keep going. I had to stop practicing. And my whole body hurt. So that was the fibromyalgia, which basically at that point was, a woman in search of some antidepressants. That was the mind thought. And
kids,
now we know
were the kids?
Oh, the kids were sick. We had asthma. We had allergies.
Husband.
We had we had migraines, psychiatric stuff. I mean, I had autoimmune thyroiditis. So it was again, everybody in the house was sick in some way or another. No dots were connected until 8 years later.
Okay.
So.
Wow. Okay, now what happened 8 years later? We're
Right.
going to discuss that. Autoimmune diseases. When I got into this field about 50 years ago, there were 30 or 40 autoimmune diseases, cancer, diabetes, etc. Today there's 135, 39 of which are named after doctors. So it's almost fashionable. Kaufmannitis is when this doesn't work with this. Not true. Kaufman and Christensen is going to be total health, really feeling good. What's your take now seeing patients, not only OBGYN patients, but everything from depression to skin problems? What's your take on how many autoimmune diseases there are, and why is that number growing? That list is getting so big.
Well, that is such a great question, Doug, because we are seeing this. We're seeing this in our children. We're seeing this all across our population, this explosion. You can see this logarithmic increase in autoimmune diseases. Well, one of the things that's really important for our viewers to understand is that 80% of our immune system is actually in our gastrointestinal tracts. So when whatever we're consuming starts to trigger the autoimmune process here, then it triggers it throughout the whole body, starts triggering all the cells to produce things like histamine or cytokines, these inflammatory chemicals. Depending on your genetics, you show up with autoimmune gastrointestinal diseases like Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, or you show up with psoriasis or eczema, or you have chronic sinusitis, chronic allergies, or you have lupus, other skin issues. Right. So we can see a thyroiditis. That was one of the things I had. So we know that the gastrointestinal tract is intimately involved with the thyroid. So then the next question is, well, what's happened in the last 30, 40 years that we're seeing this? Well, Doug, you and I both know one of the biggest things is what's happened to our food supply. Genetic modification of foods, the change in the DNA in the foods that are now covered in glyphosate, which is Roundup, we're consuming that. That acts like an antibiotic. That acts like a neuron disruptor. It turns on the immune system. So we are consuming stuff which is creating this great inflammation in the gut that then spreads throughout the body depending on our genetics. It's unbelievable what we can do from a functional whole systems approach to reverse autoimmune disease.
When I say inflammation,
Yeah.
I remember back Time magazine 15, 20 years ago,
Yeah.
had on the cover, remember that?
Yeah.
Parkinson's disease, cancer, autoimmune disease, it all has to do with inflammation. I always ask this question, see if you agree. What makes bread inflamed?
That's a great question.
Could that same yeast make us inflamed? So then we get down to a test, folks, that you can go to your doctor, get a blood test. It's called a C-reactive protein. And it apprises the doctor, okay, you're swelling inside. You know, you have a high CRP. And now we know that systemic fungal reactions cause elevated C-reactive protein. So do you see a lot of overweight, obesity, or just people who are, doctor, I'm swelling, look at my arms. I mean, what's going wrong with me? Why inflammation?
Well, again, our body is designed to, when it's feel like there's an invader that's come in, to protect itself. That's what our immune system is for. We are turning on our immune system to help kill off and get rid of whatever bad guys are out there.
Right.
The challenge is when that becomes us. When, again, we've lost our barriers, our boundaries. It's called leaky gut syndrome.
Yep.
And we're flooding the body with toxic immune-stimulating substances, then we're inflamed. It turns on all the inflammation, and so it can show up as swelling. It can show up as skin disorders. It can show up as acne. It can show up as swelling and disorders in the brain. That's where the psychiatric symptoms are coming from. You know, it can, in the colon, you get all these gut diseases.
Do you remember the day you got it? Like you go
Oh,
been
yeah.
through all your
Totally.
medical
I
education.
totally remember the day
You
I got it.
graduate cum laude
Yeah.
from Rice,
Yeah.
then you go to Baylor, you graduate top 10. But one day you got it. Tell me about that.
Well, I was so blessed. Bob Scarborough at
Yes, I know him.
at Abrams Roll Pharmacy, fabulous compounding pharmacy where I had a little square of an office, a closet, took me to listen to Jeff Bland for the first time. Dr. Jeff Bland, who's one of really the founding fathers of functional medicine. I was blown away. I was like, oh my God, this is the first real medicine I've heard since I was a freshman in medical school. Really looking at biochemistry, physiology, genetics, toxicology. It's like, wow. You know, there's really only 5 causes for all diseases.
And Jeff talks about supplementation,
Yeah.
proper diet, posture, everything you now. I mean, folks, I've said this often, and it applies to Dr. Christensen. When you give a person a fish, they eat for a day.
Right.
When you give a doctor a fish, they can help so many other patients. She's now doing that, no longer in just OBGYN.
Right.
You now have a multifaceted practice that's complementary, integrative, and so forth. Thank you so much for coming in today. By the way, for more information, CarpathiaCollaborative.com. You've got to go there, CarpathiaCollaborative.com. Thanks again.
Thank you.
I started the diet back in November, and I did it for about 2 months. Anyhow, I first started, I was weighing about 215. After about a month and a half, I dropped about 25 pounds. And I did notice more energy, definitely, within a month, and a little more clarity of thinking. Also noticed that I was kind of lighter on my feet, not getting tired as quickly throughout the day and stuff. So I was definitely noticing the benefit from doing the diet. I was actually spending a lot of time in Joplin with the tornado relief and stuff after the tornado hit my place, and I started having trouble breathing and things of that nature, and I began to realize there was a lot of mold in the air. As far as people doing the diet, I do recommend it, especially if you want to lose weight, which seems to be a concern with a lot of people. This diet will definitely take the weight off you. I had no intention of losing weight, but I did anyways. And also, if there's issues that you might have that could be fungus related or whatever, and your digestive issues, things of that nature, definitely recommend doing the diet. And worst case scenario, you do a couple months just to kind of rule this out or whatever, but I think it's more common of a problem than people realize.
Isn't she amazing? It was just a couple of weeks ago I sat with her on this set, and the questions didn't stop. How valuable is a doctor who couldn't turn to her own prescription pad to cure her misery? She now becomes valuable not only to that loving family, but to every new patient she sees. She's got in her mind that mold is causing many problems, many hormonal aberrations, many systemic aberrations, many symptoms, many diseases. And my friends, she is right. I have so many friends who are physicians who now look at a sick patient with totally different eyes than when they graduated from medical training. Okay, so thank God she is here. Really enjoyed interviewing her, and thank you for telling your friends about the show. And I just had to look at this. In 2002, I showed you this the other day. I wrote a book. Dr. Dave Holland, Dr. Beverly Hunt, and I put a book together. It's called The Germ That Causes Cancer. Now, this was extremely controversial 20 years ago. You know, we'd give lectures 20, 30 years ago and talk about the cancer fungus phenomenon. And, you know, it was tough. It was very tough. Now, folks, we're finding that sometimes cancer is being misdiagnosed. Even biopsied cancer is being misdiagnosed. I keep thinking about that study where they had 27 lung cancer patients confirmed with x-rays, doctors' exams, blood tests, and so forth. And then later found out when they did some further studies, mold testing on the cancer in the lungs wasn't cancer at all. That was published in a journal called Lung, L-U-N-G, in 2013. That's just one tiny study, but here are 27 people that had biopsies and said it was cancer, and it wasn't. Understand, folks, fungus changes everything. Fungus can make that biopsy look exactly like cancer. So I had this question, and I think it's a good one. Actually, I didn't sign a name to this because I get this question about every 2 months. Here it is. Hi, Doug. If, as you believe, fungus mimics or causes cancer, wouldn't antifungal medications help cancer patients? Home run. Thank you for all of those of you who want to know. I mean, that was my first question so many years ago, and it's actually how my interest peaked. It was in the 1970s, early 1970s in Los Angeles, peaked because I witnessed someone on an antifungal drug improving, getting better tumor markers on her cancer tests. And I wondered, is it that antifungal drug? Because that's the only thing that's changed, okay? So I want to show you, there's only a few, there's a very limited number of antifungals on the market. What, maybe a dozen? And doctors are now looking for new plant-based antifungals. Very exciting. They're saying vitamin D3, resveratrol, zinc, all of these might be very, very good antifungals to treat patients. Not just we, the people who walk into health food stores, but to treat real doctors' patients with these antifungals. So let's take a look at some of these studies. This comes out of identification of griseofulvin as an inhibitor of centrosomal clustering in a phenotypic-based screen. Cancer Research, the year is 2007. Antifungal drug kills cancer cells? Scientists at the German Cancer Research Center have discovered that the antifungal drug griseofulvin forces cancer cells into death. We call this apoptosis. Now, folks, that was done a dozen years ago. Can you even imagine these doctors all gathered around writing this big, you can almost not understand the terms of the paper that they've written, but they took an antifungal drug, they had some cancer cells, and they sprinkled a little bit of that griseofulvin on the cancer cells, expecting maybe they'd slow their movement or something. Popped them. Apoptosis is death of cancer cells. Keep in mind, this is an in vitro test, okay? This takes place outside of the body. Would it do the same thing inside the body? Those are the studies that need to be done. So antifungal drug called griseofulvin, that's an old one, a 50-year-old drug, forced cancer cells into death, okay? Here's the next study. This comes out of UT Austin, out here in Texas, done 2012. An inexpensive antifungal drug slows tumor growth and shows promise as a chemotherapy for cancer. In trials on mice, the antifungal drug thiabendazole decreased blood vessel growth in fibrosarcoma tumors by more than 50%, and it slowed the growth of the tumors to a crawl. Do you see where I'm going with this, folks? This is a smart place. I've been there, UT Austin. These are kids with, 180 IQs. Didn't one of them call their mom and say, Mom, you're not going to believe this. Thiabendazole, that you can get anywhere, it's an antifungal drug, stopped tumor growth in cancer of mice to a crawl. Has anyone ever picked up on that work? Shh. It's almost like, no, don't. That proves nothing. Here we have two different antifungal drugs, and there's only a dozen of them out there that are showing good effect for cancer patients. Here's the next one. Antifungal drug treats prostate cancer. The antifungal drug was used in combination with cortisone. It is called ketoconazole or Nizoral. This was published in the Medical Tribune 22 years ago. Would not every physician in the country be duty-bound, in any country, be duty-bound when he has a prostate cancer patient or benign prostatic hyperplasia, swelling, high PSA, to put that man on Nizoral? And yet, nobody does. And it's 22 years later. How exciting was that discovery? How discouraging is it that all of these antifungal drugs that help cancer, poof, nothing ever done about it again. What if fungus were a cancer? I'm telling you, an incredible, credible science is being totally overlooked. And then this one. Antifungal drug stops cancer from metastasizing by inhibiting angiogenesis. That means it starves the tumor from growing in another place in the body. Researchers at Johns Hopkins have discovered, and I left it in there from this article, to their surprise, that a drug commonly used to treat toenail fungus called Sporanox could also block the growth of new blood vessels commonly seen in cancers. This is huge. Okay, listen what happened with this drug, Sporanox. From toenail fungus drug to cancer drug. This comes out of the Journal of Medicine and Chemistry. It has been previously suggested that itraconazole or Sporanox inhibits the hedgehog pathway, the cancer pathway, through which a key regulator of this signaling cascade. Maybe, I say, but maybe not. This paper actually ruled out that Sporanox worked by inhibiting the hedgehog pathway. So how might it work then? Might the reason that Sporanox works for cancer be the exact reason it works for toenail fungus? It kills fungus. That's what the drug was made to do. Could cancer be a fungal infection disease? Thank you, Dr. Christensen, for joining us today. Thank you, and God bless each and every one of you for joining us each and every day. Tell a friend and know the cause.